Hey guys, thanks for tuning in this time. Today we got a real special motorcycle to showcase for you. This here is a 1999 Excelsior Henderson Super X. This is a very unique bike, only made for 2 years. Less than 2,000 total were produced. And it was a bike that was made at a time when it was very difficult to get an American-made motorcycle. Around that time, if you wanted to buy a brand new Harley Davidson, you were probably going to be waiting for about 1.5 to 2 years. That reason right there is kind of the main drive for this motorcycle ever becoming made. It was thought up back in '93, I believe is when the first drafts were started. They had a prototype bike that was out at the motorcycle shows in '98. And by '99, they had 140 dealers across the country ready to sell the Excelsior bikes. And by middle of 2000, they were bankrupt. So to get your hands on one of these bikes, they're out there, but it's not an easy thing to do. The other thing with the Excelsior bike is since they had such a short run, there were some early design flaws that should have been addressed if you actually wanted to ride one of these reliably. The cool thing with this bike is that all the updates have been done. The 3 big things to worry about. First off was transmission. I believe it was 4th gear that was weak and would shear off. So the transmission in this had been done with all the correct hardened gears, been replaced to the better components. Another piece that was a problem on this bike was part of the intake. I'll show you on the camera here. But the back side of the throttle body here originally was plastic, and they changed that to a metal piece now. So the update, the old part would crack out, and then you'd have air suction. You'd run lean, and you'd actually burn your valves out on the engine. With the metal back plate, that problem has been alleviated. The other thing that they had was the rear wheel. The rear wheel, I believe it was in the hub. It was aluminum, and it would waller out, and you'd see some of these bikes go down the road and they'd have a rear wheel shimmy. So this has had the steel sleeve inserted on the rear wheel, so that should no longer be an issue. Otherwise, once those things were alleviated, the bikes are actually really reliable. From the time that these were produced, which this here is in 1999, it's actually the 1,025th bike made. But when these bikes were introduced, it was pretty technologically advanced for an American motorcycle at the time. This is actually a dual overhead cam V-twin. It has fuel injection. Most of the Harley Davidsons at that time, there were a few of the bigger models that had fuel injection, but they were still, and still are pretty much minus the V-rod, they were all push rod engines. Kind of an older design, just a 2-valve head, where this is a 4-valve head. You had a much better performance, in theory, out of an engine of this size, which this engine here is 1386 cc. 5-speed transmission. They were geared pretty low, if I remember right, 2,000 RPM at 60 miles an hour, which is better than what my Indian does. My Indian actually, I think, had 6th gear runs at a little bit higher RPM than that. So they were a great cruising motorcycle. They weren't barn burners or anything like that. They had decent power. They had good torque. But by today's standards, they're a little lackluster. The most striking thing about these bikes, of course, is their front end with the exposed springs. So this is kind of to pay homage to the original Excelsior Super X from the 20s. It has the leading link with the suspension arms going through the front fender. It's a design element that they kept with this bike to try to give it that throwback look. What do they call this? This is the X-Twin, if I remember correctly. It says, yeah, X-Twin here, it says on the air cleaner. So they had the unique engine, which again at the time was a pretty unique piece and a pretty advanced piece for an American bike. What do we got? This bike here has pretty much every single upgrade that you could have gotten from the factory. So this bike, when you would have gotten it new, would have been stripped down. Windshield is an accessory that was added. This has running lights, which was an accessory that was added. The highway bars is an accessory that was added. The saddlebags are an accessory that was added. The rear sissy bar and luggage rack is an accessory that was added. The only part on this bike that hasn't been upgraded was the exhaust. They had a slash cut muffler system that you could have purchased. And beyond that, this bike has every upgrade that was offered from the factory during their short run. Now, production totals are kind of in question a little bit, because once the company filed for bankruptcy in the middle of 2000, things kind of changed. I think there were some bikes that were produced towards the end that the production numbers aren't really known. I've heard numbers of 1963 bikes, 1920, somewhere around there. Either way, less than 2,000 of these things have been made. And really the only difference from the research that I've done between the 99 model year and the 2000, at least the most visible difference, is your marker lights in the front are on the handlebar in 99, and in 2000 they were actually mounted to the fork. And they came out right alongside this spring. So now this bike we do have for sale at the dealership here, so if you have questions on that, or if you're interested in this at all, I'll leave a link to our dealership below so you can get a hold of us. But I'm not making this video to sell you anything. I'm just trying to go off some history before we lose this motorcycle to the next owner. It's really rare and unique for something like this to come in, especially with all the updates done to it, which we have all the paperwork for to show you what all has been done. Heck, I even got the original invoice. This bike new was around $18,000 when it was brand new back in 1999. So it's a really neat piece of history. The cool green and silver two-tone color, and the silver is kind of a goldish silver, I guess, but I believe in the pamphlets, the sailor brochures, they called the color green and silver. There were other bikes that were an oyster two-tone, which the oyster is a little bit different shade than what this is. But I'll tell you what, let's go take this guy for a quick spin so you can kind of see what it's like to go for a ride on an Excelsior Henderson. And when we come back, we'll give you some final thoughts on how this bike performs compared to modern V-twin cruisers.
All right, we're going to take a nice quick jaunt on our Super X Excelsior Henderson. So you kind of sit up a little taller on this guy. Like my Indian, I feel like I'm sitting down in it a little bit more. This guy, you're kind of sitting up a little taller. Not a bad bar reach. I definitely have ample leg room because I'm sitting up so tall. Not the biggest powerhouse, but not bad. You gotta remember this bike's over 20 years old. Gorgeous day for early April in Wisconsin. Look at that, 67 degrees. Pretty awesome. Easter weekend on two wheels, pretty happy. Last year we had a bunch of snow. So this bike here has 12,834 miles on it. And the guy that we got it from, he traded it in on an Indian cheap vintage. He's had numerous Excelsiors. The reason that he owned this one, he had ones that were even more rare than this. But this bike is in such pristine condition, and with the updates being done, making it a reliable bike to ride, I mean, it's really the ultimate collector slash rider. What are we doing right now? 40 miles an hour or so. This thing just cruises along. A little stiff suspension. I think we had 4 inches of travel in the rear. I don't remember the front travel numbers, but it rides decent, you know, especially for how old it is. But not quite what my Indian is, but honestly, it's a pretty comfortable bike. The seats are really good. Nice ride bike though. for me, it'd be a great second, third, or fourth motorcycle kind of deal. Something other than what the guy next to you has. Yeah, kind of cool.
Alright, we got this beauty out in the sunlight. It is a pretty neat looking motorcycle. Definitely unique. I'll show you this guy here. For a 21, 22-year-old motorcycle, heck, even for a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old motorcycle, this is in really nice shape. Very, very well taken care of. There's that really unique front end, probably the most striking piece on it, and that fender. But that's why this guy had this bike, just because of the condition of it. The chrome's in impeccable shape. It's not absolutely flawless. I noticed earlier we got a little paint chip right there, but that's about the only thing I noticed that was kind of flawed. Really a neat motorcycle. Compared to a modern, Harley Davidson, modern Indian, American Cruiser, there's definitely some stuff that's left to be desired. For me, the engine vibration is a little much, but again, I would still have one of these in my stable, to add to the collection, more or less, just because of the history of it, well, albeit so brief. But it is just a really neat bike that you just don't see every day. You don't see everywhere. So I know there's things that maybe I got wrong. You guys can correct me in the comments below. And there's stuff that I left out. I mean, the history, although it is short for these guys, there is definitely some stories to be told. There's a lot of other resources out there on YouTube that kind of go over the time when these were getting produced and the kind of the climate and everything. You can see some of the videos the Harlan brothers actually made when they were looking for investors and stuff when they were getting the plant in Belle Plaine, Minnesota up and going. But anyway, hopefully for those of you that don't know much about these at all, I was insightful, and for anyone that has any other tidbits of information they want to add, please feel free to do so in the comment section below. There's the quick video on the Excelsior Super X. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and I look forward to seeing you next time in a future video.